Hello, welcome to Irons United for another, West Ham Confidential. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about my all-time West Ham matchday squad. Not your best all-time West Ham 11. No, I'm talking about the whole squad. This is what I've done. Let's see if you agree with me. There's a couple of surprises in there, but I'm going to explain it as I go along. Right, let's kick off. In goal, my all-time number one goalkeeper for the starting 11 will be Phil Parkes. Now, I know this is a generational thing. Others may want to choose a latter keeper. Maybe some older fans may choose an early keeper. But for me, Phil Parkes, 1979 to 1990, over 340 appearances. Didn't score any goals, you know, a la like a Pat Jennings of that era. But nonetheless, one of my favourite players, West Ham players of all time, in fact. And he makes the number one slot. So, Phil Parkes in goal. Right back. I think there can only be one right back. And that's got to be Ray Stewart. From 1979 to 1991, he actually scored over 80 goals, 84 goals, and over 345 appearances. For first class appearances. So, Mr. Penalty King, Mr. Reliable, always there. 1980 Cup, FA Cup winner as well. So Ray Stewart, right back. See if you agree. I know there's a couple of other contenders in there, but I think he's head and shoulders. He's probably the player in any position who is head and shoulders above any other player that I can think of. But let me know if I'm wrong. Let me know if there are other contenders there. Okay. Now, in central defence, I've gone for Bobby Moore, and I think lots of people thought, well, okay, obviously. But look, 1958 to 1974, FA Cup winner, Cup Winners' Cup winner, World Cup winner, of course. He left West Ham to join Fulham a year before we beat Fulham in the FA Cup in 1975. But he scored 24 goals, over 540 league appearances, so on and so forth. So there's more appearances within that, of course, but again, it's just a great player, a talisman, somebody who, as a West Ham fan, he's one of our number one players of all time, isn't he? So he had to be in there, respected all over the world, and has just not only for his achievements for club and country, but just for the man. I think so. He's in there. Alongside him, whilst he wasn't always strictly a defender, I know, and many people may contest this, I've gone for the other man who's right at the top of the list for me and for many fans, of course. I even sit in the stand that was named after him at the stadium now recently. Billy Bonds, of course, 1967 to 1988, over nearly 60 goals, 59 goals, over nearly 800 appearances, and I think it should have been one more for 800 really, 799 appearances in total. And then left back. Two spells at West Ham. Not many people realise this, but Julian Dicks again. This was a tight one for me because, and I'll explain later, because I wasn't quite sure. But Julian Dicks for me, 1988 to 1993, and then came back 1994 to 1998. 61 goals, 262 appearances, had some injury issues as well. Great penalty taker again. Great man, great leader, real, one of the old hard men of football. That's what I always liked. Always played with 100%. Was on the coaching staff with Slaven Bilic, of course. So for me, Julian Dicks is always going to be up there. And I suppose again, this is another generational thing. Whether you kind of rate Julian Dicks in that kind of higher rank of all West Ham players, or where do you think he's a kind of mid-range? I would put him in the high range, not only because of the way he played, the manner in which he played, but also some of the ability to inject that enthusiasm to other players as well. He was a leader not only by example, but also by getting others going on the pitch as well. So For me, that he would be there. So Ray Stewart, I think, head and shoulders above any other player in that position. Bobby Moore and Billy Bonds, you've got to have those two in defence. And Julian Dix left back there. Okay, I've gone for a straight 4-4-2 here. I know I could have changed formations too, and I've kind of put players in where they probably shouldn't have been, but bear with me. So my on the left in midfield, I've gone for one of my all-time favourites, and I know it's one of your all-time favourites as well, if you're of that era as well, Alan Devonshire. 1976 and 1990, over 29 goals and 358 appearances. I just love the man. I just love the player. I just never forget, you know, that sweet spot, you know, from sort of 1980 until 82. It's just a great player for me. A childhood player for me, you know, just growing up in my teens. Just loved the player. Loved the way he played, and I think you could put Alan Devonshire and some of the other previous players that I mentioned already into any team right now, and he would still thrive. He was that good. He was that brilliant. So, if you ask many fans, they would actually have Alan Devonshire as their number one player, and you know it's hard to argue with that sometimes. Just for his stats kind of don't really show off how good he was. So for me, Alan Devonshire in there. Okay, on the right of midfield, this is going to surprise a few people. I've gone for Joe Cole. Now, Joe Cole, 1998 to 2003. Then he came back after the Chelsea spell, 2013, 2014. 15 goals, 157 appearances. I think he was probably one of the players that we had that just had that skillful ability, that innate ability to dribble, to be able to go past players. You know, he lifted the crowd any time he would play. And for me, you know, if there was a lot of the time he was playing in a bad West Ham team, or a mediocre West Ham team, I should say, and he would shine above everybody else. No wonder, you know, he was, swooped in, or Chelsea swooped in to take him, because he is he was a great player. And, you know, if you listen to the way he talks now, he's a very knowledgeable lad as well. So, you know, I would say Joe Cole, you know, if he goes on to more coaching roles, you know, I could see him as a potential future West Ham manager. That's already muted already, whether he would ever come onto the coaching staff as it is. But, you know, watch out for Joe in the future. But certainly as a player, he was just electric. And he had little glimpses in the England side as well. Never really quite burst through. But certainly as a West Ham player, you know, he was just fantastic. So, Joe Cole for me. Okay, in the centre, you've got to have the one and only Sir Trevor Brooking. 1967 to 1984. 2 FA Cup wins, of course, 75 and 1980, with the deft header in 1980 as well. Lovely. And 102 goals and 643 appearances, or thereabouts. What more is there to say really about Trevor Brooking? Fantastic, cultured player. Always seemed to have lots of time on the ball. Always seemed to have the ability to make a pass, score goals, do the flamboyant, do the easy. He was an all-round player. Could you put him in a modern day team? Possibly. Whether you'd be able to keep up the pace and, you know, that kind of thing is very difficult to compare older players with modern players. But in terms of general ability, fantastic. One of our best players that we've ever had, of course. Club legend, and for many he would be number one as well. He's certainly always in my top 10 all-time players as well, as with Bobby Moore, Billy Bonds, Alan Devonshire. Those kind of players are right up there for me. And the other one who makes up midfield, who kind of wasn't really strictly midfield, but I suppose I would class him more of midfield, is Paolo Di Canio. Yes, I know he's more forward in attacking roles and everything, but Paolo Di Canio for me, 1999 to 2003. Many people think he actually stayed with us for a lot longer than that, but he's only here for 4 odd years. 118 appearances, over 50 goals, 51 goals. Again, of a generation. he was our hero, wasn't he? He wasn't our number one player. And look, it wasn't all sunshine and roses with Paolo Di Canio. It wasn't all success. In fact, there were quite a few failures with the team at that time. But he was the one who always brought 100%, brought that passion, that Italian flair, that passion. And who can forget some of the goals he scored? So I was going to say, you know, that kind of gentleman Trevor Brooking with that fireball of Paolo Di Canio in the centre midfield, I think they would have worked fantastically well. Joe Cole on the right with the flair as well. Alan Devonshire on the left. I think you can agree that's a pretty healthy midfield there. And also, I think Paolo Di Canio would have added a bit of steel in there as well, you know, whereas the other three were more sort of flair, flamboyant. He would have gone there with a bit of toughness there. So I think that would have worked. Okay, up front, I'm actually going to surprise a few people here on the basis of my choices. But the first choice is going to be Geoff Hurst. Okay, 1959 to 1972. He scored 250 goals, 411 appearances. Look, he, you know, FA Cup winner, Cup Winners' Cup winner, World Cup winner. You know, so he is part of the Holy Trinity, isn't he? You know, Moore, Peters and Hurst. For me, he would be most suited in that forward role to actually play today than any of the other past players, certainly of that era or before that. I think he had it all. Some of the footage that I saw, some of the stats of him throughout his whole career was just amazing, really. So I think in many ways he's, and with Martin Peters as well, he's kind of really underrated when you compare him to Bobby Moore, the likes of Bobby Moore and Billy Bonds and so on and so forth. But make no doubt about this, Geoff Hurst was probably one of our finest players ever. Probably one of the finest players to ever grace the game as well. So he's going to be in there. Okay, my partner for Geoff Hurst, because I wanted a bit of, you know, height difference there, and I want a bit of different styles in there as well. But I've gone for probably, again, one of our all-time best goal scorers, not the best all-time goal scorer, but one of the better ones, Tony Cottee. Now, again, generational thing, I know, but again, 1990, two spells, West Ham, of course, 1983 to 1988, then 1994 to 1996, 146 goals, 279 appearances. He was part of the partnership that, you know, led us to our best league finish, of course. So he was a goal scoring machine, you know, a workhorse, you know, and he brought everything to every game. Yeah, it wasn't, you know, always roses. There wasn't always immediate success, of course, but there was goals, there was hunger, there was desire, and there was playing as a team, and he had it all for me. So, you know, Tony Cottee, you know, he is makes up the partnership up front. So that's my 11. Okay, now the subs for the matchday squad here. Okay, this may surprise quite a few people, but I've gone for sub goalkeeper Lucas Fabianski. Yes, I think, joined us in 2018, of course. You know, he was Hammer of the Year last year. He's made 54 appearances. He hasn't scored any goals. He's let in lots of goals. He's had a couple of calamitous games this season before it all ended, of course. But let's not forget, and this is what I always say about Fabianski, in that whilst he might have been letting in goals, he's actually stopped many goals going in, and the scoreline could have been cricket scores if it wasn't for Lucas Fabianski. I just love the way he plays. I love his shot stopping ability, his command of the box in general, the way he gives enthusiasm to his defence and to the midfield. You know, we knew when we had Roberto in goal that it just wasn't right. You know, and he got injured, of course, so he's had a couple of injuries as well to deal with, but Lucas Fabianski, I think, is probably our best goalkeeper that we've had in many and many years. Now, I know there have been other keepers up there as well. You know, it's certain periods in their West Ham career where they were really, really great. you know, you could say Ludo, you could say Green, but for me, Lucas Fabianski is right above there. Let me know what you think about that, because I know that's going to be a bit of a contentious issue for some of you. But I think Lucas Fabianski is probably one of our best keepers in a generation. He could be one of our best keepers ever. But there we go. Right, subs. Now, I wasn't sure whether to put this one in here, but I have to just because of the stats. Vic Watson, from 1920 to 1935, he scored 326 goals. I put him on the subs bench because I think he deserves the mention. Do I think he'll be able to, make his way or compete in the modern game? No, I don't, because it's a totally different game, of course. Different opposition, different types of players, different pace and everything. But, 326 goals. He is our all-time leading goal scorer. So I think, he's got to be in there. But as a sub, just warming up the bench, getting all the players, up for it. And say, look, you've got to do better than that if you want to beat my record type thing. So I think for him, he's got to be in there. My other player in there as a defender, I was very torn between having him in the starting 11 as well. But for me, one of our best all-time defenders as well, Alvin Martin. 1978, 1996, 27 goals, 596 appearances. He's one of our all-time greats, isn't he? And he's still very much respected all over the world, and also gone to broadcasting, speaks very well. He's just a great player. His lad, made a few appearances for us when Roberto was having a mare, so he's come in, stepped in. He's a good number 2, well, number 3, gone back to number 3 now that Randolph's in there currently. But, Alvin Martin, I'm sure you agree, one of our all-time players. FA Cup winner, of course, 1990, or sitting in the squad and everything. So, one of my favourite players of all time. Next player, again, I wasn't sure whether I should put him in the starting 11, but I put him on the bench, not only for his partnership with Tony Cottee, and also that great run that we had in the year that he was with us, 1986, of course, with our best league position. But 1985 to 1987, and then 1989 to 1992, 2 spells of West Ham, Frank McAvenny, 60 goals, only 153 appearances. Yeah, he had a few demons and he was a bit of a lad, of course, we know that. But, that one period where he was just banging in goals for fun, he was being touted as the next Dennis Law and all this sort of stuff. He was appearing on chat shows. He just went, on a massive run that year, and what a fantastic player he was. Could we say over the whole career? Probably not. That's why I've put him in there on the subs bench rather than in the actual starting 11. But I think, he was one of our finest goal scorers at least. Okay, the next one here, again, I've gone for a more of attacking subs bench rather than anything else. But the next one of my all-time favourites, and I think one of the players that's probably most underrated as a West Ham player, Paul Goddard. Paul Goddard, we signed from QPR, 1990 to 1987, 69 goals, 170 appearances. For me, growing up in my teen years, watching West Ham, he was just one of my favourite players of that time. David Cross was also one of my favourite players as well. And I've got a special mention for other players here, but Paul Goddard for me was one. Now, I know lots of you would disagree with this player, of course, and I know, but this is purely coming from my experiences of watching him, of some of the games that we were down and out. We scored, some goals, some crucial goals, some of the play. I just love watching Paul Goddard play. So, if you're of that era, maybe you agree with me. If you're of a younger era, you're probably thinking, who? And if you're an older era, you probably think, no, he wasn't that good compared to other players. But all I can say is, for me, Paul Goddard was a great player. Okay, again, slightly before my time, unfortunately, but again, another player that I really, really loved, and not so much for only his appearances, but the way he played, but just the the environment in which he was playing at that time. For me, Clyde Best was a great player. I think he should have been on the subs bench at least here. 1969 to 1976, scored 58 goals, 186 appearances. He was just a bull of a player, you know, a real hard player. All the footage that I've seen of him, I've always loved watching. I've always loved hearing stories about Clyde Best as well. Such a great player, and the kind of player that we needed, and the kind of player that we possibly could still do with today. So that's why I've put him in there. Okay, my next player here, and again, this may ruffle a few feathers here, but Rio Ferdinand, I think one of our best West Ham defenders that we had as a younger age. And if you'd only stayed with us, you probably would have been one of our all-time greats. He went on to Leeds and on to Manchester United, England fame, and also, you know, how great was Rio Ferdinand and as a player. But he came from us. He came from our system, didn't he? And, you know, 1995 to 2000, 5 years with us. 2 goals, 127 appearances. You know, he grew as a player. He developed his talent as at West Ham, and you could see that and he was probably one of the best natural defenders to ever come out of West Ham. That's why I've given him a special mention in there. I know he wasn't with us the whole time, but I think if he had, he would have been fantastic. Okay. Finally, I've got a couple of other players here that maybe you would agree or disagree. But for me, one of the best all-time left-backs, and this is, I wanted to put him in the first team, but I was torn between him and Julian Dixon. Maybe you can guess who I'm thinking of, but Frank Lampard, senior, his dad, not a younger one. And I don't call him senior, I just call him Frank Lampard. But 1967 to 1985, 2 FA Cup wins, obviously 75 and 80. 670 appearances, just a fantastic player. You know, one of the old school, old breed players, and I just love that. I love that old time. I love that 70s, 80s period of football. And I think he was just fantastic. So Frank Lampard, for me, gets on the bench at least. And I tell you what, it's so close between putting him on there. I think the only thing that stopped me putting him on there was that I wanted somebody who was a little bit more of a modern player that might be able to give the starting 11 a better chance in the modern era of playing the game. That's why I wanted to have a bit more of a balance there. But I think he was fantastic. Okay, my final player, I suppose this is an extra player on top of the match day squad, but I couldn't help but put him in there. So I know this is cheating a little bit. The next player, for me, I think is the best West Ham player that never really was. And I want to explain this, and I've talked about him before. 2006 to 2009, he only played 46 times or there or thereabouts, scored 15 goals, but he was blighted by injury. He was just breaking into the England squad. He was so many times he was the bull up there, the big powerhouse up front for us, scored some crucial goals, so many great memories, but just so unfortunate. Dean Ashton, for me, could have been one of the best West Ham players, or one of the best West Ham goal scorers, I should have said, that we would have seen in a generation. And he speaks so well now. I love listening to the way he talks and his high regard for West Ham. There's a lot of affection from him towards West Ham and from fans of that era towards him as well. That's why I've put him in here. He's a special mention for me. This is a bit of selfishness from me, I know. But Dean Ashton, whilst the stats don't match up as being one of our best players, if you'd watch him of that era, you probably think, do you know what, it's such a shame that he had injuries and everything, because he really could have been one of our finest players of all time. He came with a great record as well, and he could have gone on for a few more years and just banged them in. And if he wasn't blighted by injury, who knows what would have been with Dean Ashton. Anyway, so there you go. That's my match day squad. Let me know if you agree with that. Now, I'm going to give you some other players here that probably deserve a special mention. And many of you may not have heard of them. And, these are from our earlier times, as it were. But John Dick, from 1953-62, scored 166 goals. Jimmy Ruffle, 1921 to 1937, scored 166. Johnny Byrne, 1961-67, 107. Pop Robson, 2 spells, 70 to 74, and then from 76-79, scored 104 goals. Malcolm Musgrove, 1953 to 63, scored 100 goals. And then here we got Sad Pudfoot, 1912 to 21, and then 1931 to 33, he scored 72 goals. He also scored lots of other goals as well, but they were kind of deemed in wartime years, so that wasn't really appropriate. But the 3 next players, some of you would really appreciate, and maybe some of you think they should have been in the match day squad of all time, and I kind of agree. This is why I'm mentioning this this team here, these extra players. These extra players, most of them, I just don't think would have made a modern match day squad, or anywhere near it. But these next 3, I think, definitely would have. And it was just touch and go whether I put them in the full match day squad. But here we go. The first one, of course, many of you would think, well, why haven't you mentioned him already? But Martin Peters, the late Martin Peters, 1962 to 1970, obviously FA Cup, Cup Winners' Cup, World Cup winner, 100 goals, great player, great all-round man, of course, and I just wanted a little bit of balance in the side, but he was so close to going into the match day squad, so close to going onto the subs bench at least. And many of you are thinking, what, you're having Dean Ashton or Clyde Best or Paul Goddard ahead of Martin Peters? I know, there's a good argument for that, and I appreciate I'll get a slate in for this. But again, it was a generational thing, and I was too, no, but by rights, Martin Peters should definitely be ahead of the likes of Paul Goddard. You would think, okay, it could, but okay. The next one is David Cross. David Cross, 1977 to 1982, FA Cup winner, of course, 97 goals. One of my all-time favourite West Ham players. One of my all-time favourite striking players. Just fantastic. As a kid, West Ham posters on my bedroom. David Cross was there as well. Love watching David Cross. Love watching him, score his goals. It's an era thing. It's a generational thing, of course, as well. Okay, and the other one was Trevor Morley. Trevor Morley, again, some of you may really appreciate Trevor Morley, but one of our, again, fantastic player. Loved watching Trevor Morley. 1989 to 1995, scored 70 goals. It's just of an era when West Ham probably didn't do that great. As a team, we had our ups and downs, of course. We had some good times, some not so good times. But for me, Trevor Morley was one of those great players. He didn't quite make the all-time match day squad. But I think out of that list, I think, on reflection, Martin Peters really should have been in there. I know. But I'm going to stick to my guns and stick with that. But there you go. That's the all-time West Ham matchday squad. Crikey. Hopefully some stats, some facts and figures there for you to digest. Let me know what you think. Let me know, which players that you would swap out for some of my selection there. I know there are some contentious ones, and I've done that on purpose as well. I think really because I wanted to, add a bit of, a bit of discussion to this really, because I think anybody's going to have their own match day squad and first 11, aren't they? And it depends what era you were in and which players that you personally saw as well. And a lot of these players that we think are fantastic, I don't know if you're the same for me, but they kind of hark back to when I was a child as well. The kind of players that I really, looked up to with starry eyes. As you get older, you get a bit jaded and you think, well, yeah, it's all right, but he's not that brilliant. But anyway, so that's it. That's my match day squad. Let's know what you think. It's been a pleasure going through these old players actually and all their stats. It's been really good. It's been good for me to, kind of refresh your memory as well. Looking at some of the players that I kind of forgotten about really, or kind of, didn't even really consider anymore. But some fantastic players we've had throughout the years. Hopefully, when things start kicking off again, that can inject some flavour into our current squad and any future squads to actually get us up the table and start winning things again, if we can, if ever that's possible. Right, well, hope you enjoyed that. Please like, share, subscribe, leave your comments below. Let us know what you think of those players. Check out more videos coming from Irons United very, very soon, and I'll catch you again. Ta-da.